there is a different way to approach joy. And it does require a death and a rebirth. And this is so important because, again, this internally sourced wealth is going to impact you for the rest of your life. If we can get this foundation down, you're unstoppable. You legit can go and do any of the things that you want to do because we're focusing on the integrity of being in alignment with the truth of who you are and unlearning the narrative and the brainwashing of what you've been told you need to be.
Being limitless is knowing your success and your growth are built on a radical belief in yourself. Limitless is honoring your purpose, your health, and impact above all else. Limitless is never playing small because the more alive you feel in your life, the more growth and success you attract. Hi, my name is Jamie Ratermann, and I am a holistic business coach, meaning I am just as invested in growing your health as I am in growing your wealth. With 11 plus years in brand and social media marketing, I help rebellious entrepreneurs master marketing, embody leadership, and say fuck it to the hustle. This show is here to encourage you to become more radically aware of your self-imposed limits, to break free of your shoulds, and to expand your brand into a movement led by you. Hello, lovelies. Welcome to another episode of the Limitless Podcast. I am floored. Today we're going to have a really cool subject, and I think it's something that I've been wanting to dig into. And now I have someone I got to meet through podcasting, who is an expert in this subject specifically. How hard is it sometimes whenever we live in a world where things are negative, we can always spiral, we can doubt ourselves, we're feeling that funk, all of the things that have kind of happened to us. How hard is it to decide to choose joy? We talk a lot about being rebellious. We talk a lot about really breaking our limits. Choosing joy can be one of the most rebellious things you do because we aren't naturally positive. We aren't naturally finding those things. So today on the pod, we've got June joining us. She is our joy guide today. She is ready to guide us to our most joyful lives. And she, of course, also has a podcast called How to Find Joy, just in case you don't get enough. But June, I am so excited that you came today, are wearing my blue because it was kismet, but also too, you get to share your wonderful knowledge with us. But June, feel free to introduce yourself.
Hello. Thank you, Jamie. I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, it's kind of serendipitous that we got to wear the same colors. So
Perfect.
Yes, this is an honor of Limitless. But yeah, I'm so happy to be here. And what I do is kind of funny because when I describe it, people are like, what? What's a joy guide? And I always get the same reaction, like intrigue and skepticism, and also like a lot of curiosity, which is totally all the things that I love. So for me, I basically help people who are struggling, who feel lost or stuck in their lives, and they know they are living a life of mediocrity. And they really want to rebel against that because they don't want to settle. They're like, screw settling. I want my best life possible. So I help them and guide them towards a more purpose-driven, magical, and joy-filled life. So that's what I do.
Can you tell why I like fell in love with her really fast? Like, of course, like everything she wants to do is fantastic. And I think that's I think it's really important. But I think a lot of like what I talk about on the podcast, we have that full control, being that source, doing these things. But tell us a little bit about how you decided to, not that you lived a mediocre life before, but you were like, you know what, I want to do something a little different. Give us a little background of how you became this joy guide for us.
Well, I did live a mediocre life, Jamie. It's not,
I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to say it.
Yes, call me out. I did. And I think that's part of the inspiration and why like we go into business for ourselves or we become entrepreneurs, right? Because we see something in our own lives and we're often inspired by our own lives. And so we want to take that inspiration and share it with others. And for me, it was just like this idea of growing up in a very linear, boring traditional route, which I feel like a lot of us kind of go through. And that's what we grew up with, especially as I think I'm an elder millennial. 84, is that elder millennial?
I don't get it. I'm a millennial. I don't want to be elder.
I don't mind being elder. It sounds very wise.
I remember MySpace and AOL. Like I'm okay with
yes,
that makes me an elder. If that makes me an elder, I'm your wisest elder. Come for me.
Yeah,
It's fine.
come, exactly. Come at me. But growing up, I was first generation Thai. And so my parents immigrated in the 70s. And so, much like the rest of the world, thinking about America, the land of opportunities, I grew up with that philosophy. And so, I definitely, my parents, much like a lot of immigrants, were had a hard emphasis on you must get educated, you must do the best, you must live this life. And once you get this master's degree or whatever, it's like, then you can get paid to do whatever you want to get paid and make all the monies, blah, 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 blah. And I feel like that was something that was so normalized. Everybody that I went to school with, everybody that I was around, it was this kind of linear thing. And then once you graduate and you get the job, you get married, white picket fence, have a baby, this is what joy and happiness looks like, right? So
Right.
that's the narrative that I was sold.
Yep.
And I don't, is that the narrative that you were sold? Am I alone in this?
Absolutely. Like the white picket fence, owning a home, some like, somehow having like two kids, and I feel like somehow we've had a modern version of what was that, like Leave It to Beaver, like what somehow
Yes.
we're still living in this idea when we know that some, like, just putting it out there, some of those women that did live that ideal life wasn't exactly
Yeah.
happy, and like how like it was not the picturesque version of it. But yeah, absolutely.
Exactly, exactly. And like my parents were born in the 50s. So that
Same,
those were
same.
the values that, they instilled in me. And so it was very Leave It to Beaver. And so I just grew up not knowing any better and being just like this obedient person who did everything like by the book and was good in school and did those things, right? And I think there was a certain point in my life where I just accepted, because it was ingrained in me, that this is normal. This is what it takes to be successful. This is what happiness looks like. This is how you gain power in the world. And so by the time, I did little pockets of rebellion. Like I know that's a part of my personality, but because I was so brainwashed to be obedient and be such a good little robot, that I just did that. I went to college, I got my degree, then people were like, you need a master's degree. So then it was like, okay, I guess you can't just get a college degree anymore. So got a master's degree. And at the time when I was in college, I was like, oh, I want to be like a child therapist. If I can't be an artist, because that's my true love, then let me be a psychologist, or somebody like that. And I went the child therapy route thinking that I was going to do that, but no. My rebellious insides had other plans. And I ended up circumventing, because I couldn't get into any of the art classes at my college, and all the football players and baseball players got into those classes
Oh,
because it was like an easy A, and I'm just like, ah, like how dare you? There's people who actually want to be in these classes. And so I ended up in like a costume design class because I was like, well, screw it. If I can't do like traditional art, like maybe I'll learn how to sew. And that took me down the rabbit hole of doing psychology and then doing costume designing on the side. And I almost got a double major in it, but I didn't want to take a history class in costume design, so I didn't. I was one credit away from it. I was like, screw that. This is how like ingrained I think the rebellion is in me
yeah,
at
of
that
course.
point,
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so then I ended up moving to Los Angeles, going to get my master's in costume design because I thought, again, if I was going to treat art in any way, it would be through a linear path. That's the only way that it would be acceptable. And my parents would be cool with it too, me moving so far away from DC. And it was like over a decade. I spent over a decade being in the industry, as we like to call it, doing costume designing, wardrobe styling. And I was thinking, like, oh, this is the way. Like, I can do art therapy, and I can, instead of being a child therapist, I could be like an adult therapist, but in a circumvented kind of way where I don't have to take more schooling. To do the clinical route, because the clinical route was so not fun and stale and not my personality at that time. And because I was so rebellious. And it's so interesting because I spent so many years studying the psychology of clothing and studying how people operate and how we can garner and harness our power through our clothing
Mhm.
and tell a story and share our narratives from a very externally driven place. And then I landed in commercials as well. So everything that I was learning was about being externally driven happiness and how you can put on your clothes and you can find happiness there. And that, you can really support your ego to feel your best and do your best. And I was working with a lot of like thought leaders at the end of my career because I wanted to move away from being on set to helping corporations. And I think my altruistic side, which was kind of lost during those years in quote unquote Hollywood, um, I felt like something needed to change. I was starting to realize that as I was supporting people in the fitting room and having like naked therapy sessions with people who
Love
like
it.
hated their lives, but then they hate their lives behind the scenes. And
Right.
then I'd support them and be like, no, you got this. And then they'd go on camera and their personality is entirely different because they have to put on a performance. And it just made me so incredibly sad because they looked the part, they sounded the part, they had all the check marks to what success should look like. And I was looking up to these people for a really long time before I met them. And then when I met them, it was like a harsh light bulb reality to be like, wait a second, what I'm striving for, like these people aren't even happy. There's no joy here.
Of
So,
course.
what are we all like working towards? What is this American dream? Like, this feels like I've been fed a lie and I just started getting really pissed.
I I love what I love about this, and I talk about this all the time with clients because like it's like we were taught to chase achievements. We were
Oh,
taught
yeah.
that that's the path to happiness. That's the way we do it. And by all means, there's goals, there's things we should set so that like we can get to where we want to go. We want to go on the journey. But
Oh,
if
yeah.
you feel like shit every single way, you hit your goals, you go there, you make it happen. Like it's either going to just like slowly like hurt your soul like
Mhm.
you're still you're making the money, you're doing the things, but you're so unhappy, or you're going to burn out and you're just going to want to like throw your hands up and walk away from it. Like this idea of like I've been saying it a lot this year, especially of going, we
Mhm.
don't chase achievement, we chase how we want to feel. And we
Yeah.
believe that this white picket fence, that this perfect body, that this specific way that a business is supposed to feel is going to allow us to be happy, and then we like punish ourselves until we get there. So like
Exactly.
the idea that like I love like your full story because you like you jump around, like you went here and then you decided to try this.
So not linear.
It's not linear, but like if you didn't do it that way, like you wouldn't have this like amazing experience. Even though you may have gone down a path for longer than you think you should have, it's going like, but someone who's coming in and going like, I know what goes on behind closed doors with these people you see that are these celebrities, this
Mhm.
all of this, like knowing that like you may be happier, or you might be working with a client that is more joyful than most that we put on our vision boards to become. So like I think there's a
Yeah.
sense of it was nonlinear on purpose so that you could come with this ridiculous wisdom that people wouldn't think to have, right? Like well, they wouldn't think to have.
No, I know. I think I appreciate it so much more. And, what you're talking about is basically this philosophy that I read about a long time ago called destination addiction. And Robert Holden coined the term. And it's basically about people who suffer because they use success as a marker or a destination.
I need to take
Um,
notes. I'm like literally wanting to put this down right now. This sounds like a book I'd love to read.
yeah. So like Robert Holden is incredible. I think he has a TEDx talk too, and now is very famous. But basically, when I heard about this, I felt so seen. I felt so seen because I was recognizing that I was chasing happiness. The pursuit of happiness for me was really a pursuit. It was like a high speed car chase, and I was gonna get it, come hell or high water. And I really felt as though I knew what I was doing because I was told that these are the steps. And then by the time that I, even tried to attempt to linearly create a career in costume design, and it's a freelance career, like you don't even know when you're going to get your next paycheck or job, like it's job to job. And it's so not linear in its own way of creating at least financial success. But at that point in my career, at the height of my career, I was making consistent money, like good money. I was in the union. I was just everything that I could do to kind of make it linear. I like checked off those marks. And I remember on my last day of work, which I did not know was going to be my last day of work, I was infused with such fury, Jamie, because I looked around and I had everything that I could have ever asked for, like all the things in school where I was like hoping and praying one day that I would get in my career. I like looked at my little list and was like, I had multiple assistants. I had the pay that I wanted. I had the team that I needed. I was working with the corporation or the business that I liked at the time. And yet I was so mad. And I'm cool as a cucumber usually, and you very jolly. And people were starting to sniff out there was something off because my volcano couldn't be contained anymore. And
Right.
so finally, it was almost like I was realizing that I had done everything to create a life of happiness and joy based on the narrative that I was told. I
Right.
did everything right, I thought was right. And at the end of the road of reaching all of those check marks, I was still so unhappy, probably even more depressed than I would like to admit. And then on top of that, feeling so lost and confused because I thought to myself, but I'm here. I've made it. I've supposed to have made it now, right? So when's somebody gonna crane in the joy, like and the happiness? I think
Course.
I earned this, guys. Come on. And then when that didn't show up, I knew I had to make a change. And so I quit my job. I did quiet quitting before it was a thing. I just didn't tell anybody.
We just didn't come up with a name for it. I quite quit it as well. I was just doing what was necessary.
I did. I did. And at the time I had savings but it was almost like I had a midlife crisis or something. Or some people would call it that. But I look back and I realized that I was just waking up to my life and from which was in a slumber for a very long time. And my anger woke me up to the fact that I need to disrupt the status quo. Like, this cannot be my life. I cannot settle for this because this is truly settling. And so that entire year after sacrifices that I made, where people would be like, we're going on vacation, we're doing this, we're doing that, like enjoying the present moment. I never did that. I was always just, nose to the grindstone, like really just making sure that I was responsible and that I was doing the right thing and that, I don't go on vacations or take time off. And workaholism was 100% my plight. And when I left, I traveled. I traveled. It was 2019 and I traveled more than I could have ever asked for. All these clients came up to me and they knew I was doing clothing and I was working with people one on one. But what was hilarious was that even though I left, I didn't have a plan. I had no idea that I was going to be a joy guide. Like, there's no guidelines for that. I also made that up. Like I made the word joy guide up. So duh, I didn't know I was going to do that. But I also had this like deep peaceful knowing that I knew that the path that I was going was not it.
Right.
And I was such a thinker at that time and this was the first time I felt like I was tuning into my intuition and I just went with the flow. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And my clients were showing me my gifts. They were hiring me saying like, June, I'm 60 years old. I'm ready to find my soulmate. Can you help me with that? And I'm like, I work with clothing, right? and they'd be like, yeah, but okay, I know what you do. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm so confused, but all right, yes, let's do that. And then someone else would come to me being like, oh, I'm going to get a divorce. I need to like find myself again. Can you help me with that?
Love that.
And again, I'm just like, okay, folks, like I work with clothes, like you know this, right? And the messaging was so loud. And so finally, I just started doing that. Like people would come forward to me, they found me, showed me who I am. And it wasn't until like later in the year that I realized, oh, I love this. Like I know, like going back, it's almost full circle, right? Because this is me helping people. I'm talking to people. So it's like therapy, but I ain't qualified for any of that. But what I am qualified for is I spent, especially in the industry, being in those fitting rooms with, people and feeding egos and then also supporting like the real true self. I have so much experience just nurturing people when they're being their true selves and really supporting them to find and harness that power. And before, when I was costume designing and styling, it was, from the place of outside going in, but I knew that that was a band-aid, and now it was like, oh, I can do it from the inside out. And so that's how Joy Guide June kind of birthed, was
I love it
because
though.
I loved that this was going to finally, all the things that were so random, all the rock bottoms that I hit and the roadblocks that I hit finally made sense. And like, this is my calling. And that's how I became a Joy Guide.
I mean, I this story, I wouldn't just like I like pour a glass of wine and listen to it. Like it's like this wonderful like twirl and move, and I love every second of it. I think what I hear in there is that there was never not a belief in self and what you were sharing and what went on like with the change and the shift, even if maybe you had to gain the courage to do, but also too that like you didn't ignore the roadblocks. I think that's a large part of where people get hung up in this process, is that they're like, I'm supposed to like this, there's something wrong with me, instead of I'm supposed to like this, what kind of signs is coming through for me to figure this out. And
Yeah.
kind of going back to just thinking about your fury, like the word that you use, because like I even too, but I'm very similar in the way that like anger, anger is an emotion that maybe I don't leave enough space for. Like that would be something that I would probably could improve upon.
Same. Same.
This idea of fury, and it was almost like you were getting these huge signals from your nervous system, or universe, wherever you're deciding to decide where it came from, but the idea of listen to us, like this isn't it, like I don't give a crap if you have a team, like this isn't it, I don't
Totally.
somebody else, like I don't give a crap if you work for a big brand, they treat you like crap or whatever it might be. And I think that they're like it's our, at least for me, I would say like our emotions really are these signals for us of going like something isn't right. And
100%.
going back to just what you were sharing about like being told this story of who we're supposed to become, is it's nice to have a blueprint. Like, let's just be clear, it's nice to have a blueprint. There's nothing,
Yes, of course.
wrong with a nice little blueprint, but the idea that we should, that through school, through just institutions, whatever, we've just been taught to ignore when we don't like the blueprint. We're like, no, to be a straight A student, I must like this blueprint. To be attractive to my future husband or wife, I need to follow this blueprint. Like this idea of like we're taught to ignore these things. And for me, I think my relationship with joy, and what we're getting back to, is realizing that joy is like getting rid of, like really like be like I said rebellious at the beginning, because it truly is like sometimes being joyful is sometimes putting other people on the back burner for a second until you're putting yourself first, or wearing the crazy thing, or like putting yourself out there in a way that you've never seen someone else do just because it seems right to you. So I think for you, how can you, like, these are using your story, but also how you help your clients, like how would you help somebody realize that they aren't experiencing enough joy in their life? Like what would be your way of going like, hey, you're malnourished in joy right now, like let me show you.
Yeah, most people come to me malnourished for sure. And honestly, they know it. They know it because it's so odd to be like, I need a joy guide, right? So if someone's coming to me, even if they don't understand what that means, they know that intuitively that it's right for them. And for me, it's like they usually come malnourished because they have lived a very repressed life. They may not know it at the time because they have so many successes and achievements or awards, or financial successes, to back that the evidence is true that when you live a repressed, unjoyful life and you work really hard, this is the power that you get out of it. But then there's still something off. And that feeling of offness usually grows bigger and bigger and bigger until it's so loud. The silence of the absence of joy is so loud that then it evokes emotion inside of them that they have also repressed to make them make a change. And whether it's chronic depression or anger and fury, there's something that disrupts their system and they reach a rock bottom of sorts. That then when they come to me, I'm like, oh, you're malnourished in joy. You've hit your rock bottom. And instead of them, they're usually surprised because they're just like, why are you so excited about this? And I'm saying this is the beginning. I'm excited because this rock bottom that you feel like you've hit, where you're lost, you're stuck, you're depressed, you feel like you are wasted potential. This is the beginning of the possibly the best chapter of your life. And from the rock bottom, you can only go up from here. And oftentimes it's like I've hit my rock bottoms, and thank goodness for, I guess, my strength and resilience or my chutzpah, whatever you want to call it. But I know that when I hit my rock bottoms, whether it's an emergency room, a visit with pneumonia in my left lung because I totally did not listen to my body and still went to work anyways because I didn't want to get fired. Like,
Right.
what? The
Yeah.
priorities are so twisted. But like these, I didn't have boundaries. Um, I didn't even know I had a choice. And it was because I've bought into this brainwashing that being normal, fitting in, doing what I'm supposed to be doing is the path to happiness. And when you're malnourished and you come to me, I help you have a catalyst for a new expansion in your life, that you can have more options, that it is possible to live a life full of joy and you don't need the fancy cars, the Gucci, all of the other external things to support you in sustaining that joy, which we all know when we break it down. And I have seen firsthand, it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter. I mean, yes, it helps. And yes, I want that for everyone. But like, it really doesn't, because I have seen some of the richest, most celebrated, most famous, either political or not, um, like reach the pinnacle of everything that we dream of. And yet they're still so freaking unhappy because they're malnourished in the essence of true joy, which to me is internally driven. It's an internally sourced wealth, and it is not talked about enough.
Internally sourced wealth. I think that's like such a fantastic conversation too. I'm a Marvel fan, so I just like to throw this out there. But like
I am
it's
too.
I relate money to superhuman serum, or the superhuman serum. Yeah, that's right. That's the one.
Yeah. Yeah.
It only it's like money only magnifies how you're feeling if you leave it like turned. Like this idea of like, oh, I want to leave my job and make a ton of money because that's going to make me happier. And it's going like, if you leave your job feeling
Mm-hmm.
doubtful, feeling unhappy, feeling like you have to be validated by others, sure, you can make a lot of money, but there's still going to be that attachment to it. So like there's this
Yeah.
idea of internal wealth. I love it. Like 100%, I love it. And like, I like the idea. I think I get it. This comes up a lot with entrepreneurs, is that there's this sense of, they see something on social media, or they see something where like they can live their life like on vacation, and they can get
Yeah.
a money, and they can do these things, and then they go like, okay, like I'm doing everything that person's doing, why aren't I as happy as what they
Yes.
look
Mm-hmm.
like?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the hard part is that when they come to someone like you or I go like, let's reflect on your inner child. Let's talk about your routines that fill you up. And then they go,
Yeah.
but I want to get to the strategy stuff, or I want to get to the achievement stuff. I want to go that direction. And it's like, yeah, but to get there, or to actually motivate yourself to do such things, it's like, why, like, how are we filling you up? So talking
Mm-hmm.
about this, and like like really understanding this idea of internal wealth, what would you say are maybe basic practices for
Mm,
someone who's starting to feel malnourished in joy, or maybe they're
yeah.
they're further along on that path and they know where to go, but the idea like what would be like basic practices just to start to incorporate joy in someone's life?
Yeah, I think, for my entrepreneurs and people who are in really, they're all high achievers. Everyone who comes to me usually are very growth mindset, high achievers, workaholics, people that I understand because I used to be that. But I think like the biggest thing is having self awareness around the fact that you're more than the productivity that you put out in the world.
Ooh,
You
that one is so hard though.
It's so hard. It's so hard. And also it's hard because, for me, I went into costume designing because I loved it. Like I genuinely love work. And I think because I had no boundaries in those areas, because I was thinking, oh, but this work brings me joy. It gets really confusing, right? Because when you think that your passion is your work, then all of a sudden it's like your passion's taken up 24/7 and then you're just not sleeping and then you're sacrificing your entire life.
Right.
And for me, I had to do like major deep inner work. And what I help my clients with is that it starts from understanding your motivation behind doing your work and behind building your business or behind why you're doing what you're doing. And yes, it's definitely inner child work, of course, when we get into the playful parts. But oftentimes, when people are malnourished in joy and come to me, um, they don't even know how to play. Like they don't even understand that pleasure is an option. And to skip from negatives to no, we just play all the time, brah. Like that is a huge gap. And so for me, I like to say that I'm the baby steps version for people to get to joy. And I love the beginning of things, but
Mhm.
it also requires endings. And so a lot of people who come to me are already on the precipice of a major life transformation. And they know that, being malnourished in this way is due to the fact that it's something's off. And for me, the way that I support them is, and the way that they can support themselves is like, well, why are you doing this? And to give an example for myself so that you can understand what that looks like, when I left my job and I became a joy guide, I was still copy and pasting my life and my work because, and I thought, oh, I unplugged from the matrix. Like I've got this down, being a joy guide, I understand. But I was also joy guiding from a place of this is what coaches do, this is what I've been told. And it was formulaic. And then again, although I was building up a successful um, career for something being new, it was also still making me feel empty. And I was like, but wait, I found my calling. And the key there is like, I still didn't understand my why. I didn't understand what is motivating me to even do this. And I had to backtrack and recognize that, oh, I'm still being driven by my shame. I'm still being driven by my guilt. And I still have low self esteem. Like I am trying to prove to everybody that I'm worthy of being heard, of being seen, that I'm doing it right. Look at me. And that is such a huge block to joy. When you don't recognize that these internal things are legitimately a ceiling for your happiness and joy, you're never going to get past the ceiling, right? We can do all the external things, but until you find that internal button that's like, push here.
Right.
Let's
Yeah.
really disrupt all the things that you have learned and unlearn them. That's the deconditioning that I help people with when they come to me. And so we build that block by not really forcing people to go into play, but I help them grieve their old self. And that's a huge
I'm
part of
so
it.
excited by everything you're saying. I'm like, yes, oh my God. Because I think but part of this is that I'm happy to say this, that I'm casting a wide net, but I would say 80%, if not more, people are motivated in their day-to-day by shame and guilt more than they are motivated by who they want to be, how they want to feel, the kind of joy
Oh,
they want to bring into their life. And I find that so sad, but
it's so
also
sad.
going like, there's a reason for it. There's a
Yeah.
reason for it. Don't be mean to yourself if you're listening to the podcast. I'm like, I think I'm motivated by shame. It's going like, we were taught it was shameful to get a low grade in school. We were taught,
Yes.
even for anyone who's religious, like there's a sense of like, we were taught like being a good person meant being altruistic to others, giving to others before yourself. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's all of these reasons. And I think there's a sense of
Yeah.
this, like calling it what it is. And I absolutely had this rock bottom moment. I was in my business probably three years in. I had this rock bottom moment that you're talking about, where
Mm-hmm.
I was doing all of the things that I knew was correct, like strategy wise. I knew exactly how to say things. I knew exactly
Yeah.
like how to pull people in. And I just got to this point where I was working pretty close to similar hours I did corporate, which was kind of the reason why I needed to leave in the first place. But also too,
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't love this. Like, I don't feel like I
Yeah.
am being fully me. And I don't, and if I keep creating this train track for this version of me, I'm going to just be the same person that left corporate. I want to be the same person that was feeling as if she was sold a bill of goods, but now I'm creating that for myself. And
Mm-hmm.
it was it was like, that was the moment where I was like, fuck the hustle. This hustle
Yes.
shit is not true. Like even do now when I see some videos where it's like, you just got to keep going, and I go like, but can there be like a reflection of like, why might you not want to keep going? Like, what's happening
Yeah.
there? So this idea
Yeah.
of releasing shame and guilt, hard. Just not gonna act like it's like a
Yeah.
snap of the fingers, but realizing that that's what it is. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you find yourself on a regular day going, I must get this done or someone's going to be mad at me, or I must get this done or I'm not a good person, I must do this thing before I have lunch, go for a walk, enjoy, like, experience things, because I won't be a good person,
Mm.
motivated by shame and guilt. That's just awareness. Let's start there. Like, start.
Yes, exactly.
But even
Exactly.
within that, when you figure it out, there's the grief moment. And I've talked about this before on the pod, is that I didn't know what grief was until I didn't really know the full extent of the grief emotion until I did lose my dad a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And and it's in its own way, gratitude. I felt grief again, and I knew what that was
Yeah.
after I was starting to release these things. And I was going like, I'm grieving a former self. I'm grieving time wasted. I'm grieving all of these pieces. But it was this idea of going like, but grief means something's ending and something's new is beginning. I get to
Mm-hmm.
celebrate the best parts
Yeah.
that I want to keep, and I get to release any of the things that aren't there. So like, there was this sense of like, when you get to if any of you are in the grief stage, it's a good stage. I promise. You
I
can't,
know.
there's no stopwatch when it's going to be done. I just want to put that out there. But like, when you hit the grief stage, it means that you're starting to see where things are going to end and what you want to continue. So you
Yeah.
saying these things, this is a podcast about joy. We're talking about guilt and
I
grief,
know.
all of the things, is that there's so many deeper layers to this. And I love that you shared that.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for sharing about your dad. And I think that's the hardest part, when we're looking for joy, it usually is during a time when we're recognizing it really very consciously. It's usually when there's hardship. And I want to debunk that to get to joy, you just have to be positive all the time because that's toxic positivity. I'm not about that. And I want to spread the message and the word that actually it's grief is a portal to joy. And rock bottoms are the endings to your old self and the beginnings of something incredible. And and that's a hard pill to swallow usually when you're in it. And
Mhm.
it's hard to accept because you feel like you're wrapped up in those emotions and it seems like there's no way out. And that's what I had to go through time and time and time again. And that's part of my mission. And the reason why I became a joy guide was like, oh my God, if somebody could have told me this, if somebody could have held my hand through this shit, I wouldn't have to feel so alone. And maybe my portal to joy would have opened up sooner. Maybe I could have really understood these lessons and these star points in my life, and I can back up and zoom out and see the beautiful constellation of my life
Mhm.
in a faster way, like a better way. And I think that's part of it, is like we are so, at least in America, ashamed of admitting that we're not okay.
Yeah.
And there's such a culture of hiding and invisibility. And that when we are visible in our vulnerability, it becomes this shame spiral. And it's with social media too. It's like once you become vulnerable on social media, the trolls come out. But again, it's like that's something that I want to help people understand, that, there is a different way to approach joy. And it does require a death and a rebirth. And this is so important because, again, this internally sourced wealth is going to impact you for the rest of your life. If we can get this foundation down, you're unstoppable. You legit can go and do any of the things that you want to do because we're focusing on the integrity of being in alignment with the truth of who you are and unlearning the narrative and the brainwashing of what you've been told you need to be. And once that clicks in, it's like the grief is a blip in time. And then you start recognizing that it's safe to be in grieving. It's safe to be seen in this way. It's actually so powerful to show up in this way. And then all of a sudden, when you start seeing, and again, maybe bringing it back to social media, you start showing that. And then there's like a huge crowd of trolls, but then there's an even bigger crowd of like, oh, thank goodness you said that. Right. That
Absolutely.
like being seen. And then all of a sudden you get, understanding, wow, right. When I'm actually the core of who I am, then that's the joy.
Yeah.
And I don't love using the social media as an immediate example, only because again, we're like looking for external validation. But again, in order to even get to that place to show up in your visibility and vulnerability on social media, you've had to probably done some legwork, hopefully, to be able
Hopefully.
to know. Yes,
Haven't come to
to
me. I'm
be
like,
able to
oh,
know.
I gotcha. But yeah, no, I think that the core of it is sharing. The
Yeah.
core of it is allowing yourself to be seen in whatever
Hmm.
form you're in, and in its best form. That's what I would love all social media to be able to
Yeah.
simply be able to share and be seen in all forms of you. But
Hmm.
on a basic level, it could be sharing with a friend. Like I like that you had brought it up a little earlier, but when I had a friend who was like, who finally, like, who always has had herself, like, figured out, and like she just seemed like she was like, nothing was ever out of place, just like that kind
Yeah.
of person. And I was living my life and like talking about things, and then what, just a phone call one day, and she goes, I think I'm needing a divorce. And I was like, my over my head, like I was like,
Shock, right? Yeah.
what is it? And
Hmm.
it's like, internally she was in this place, but it was showing weakness if it wasn't this version that she had created for herself. So
Yeah.
like the the basic of what we're saying here is like, if you find yourself in any of this, like, share it with a trusted person, share it with someone like Joy, someone like a coach, and anyway. But like the idea of, like, let yourself be seen is a really
Yes.
great start.
Yeah, that's the core actually of what I feel like I do, is that, a huge part of people who are highly driven and achievement based is that you probably have a really healthy ego. Right along with that. And there's nothing wrong with the ego. I actually really enjoy the ego. But I think it's been driving for so long. And when you come to me, what I like to say is that we can put our egos down. Like, I don't care. Like, you don't have to prove anything to me. You can show up exactly as you are. And that's part of the reason why I really love therapy and why I wanted to be a therapist. But the problem with that was more of like, I felt like there was a disconnect, a heart disconnect.
Right.
And I'm such an empathic person that, when I went to therapy, I felt kind of just like, okay, cold and clinical. And
Yeah.
all right, I just dumped all my problems on you and now I just leave. Okay. Like, I don't really know what to do with that.
Right. Oh, that was,
And
I've had a lot of therapists who become coaches, or add a coaching like side of their business, and it's like they're missing the ability to fully connect with the client. I think
yes.
that's something I love about how coaching is a little different, especially when you know how to handle people's like troubles. It's not just like, I'm a coach. It's like, I know exactly like how to walk you through these things. Like I find that's part of why I really love good coaches, is that it's like you are getting a version of therapy and you get to see an example in front of you.
Yeah. And I think that's like the biggest thing, right? Because, in order to even practice it there and being vulnerable, you need a space. And for me, what I love to do is kind of give like a loving, safe nest for people to land and they can like, oh, drop their shoulders, don't have to prove, and really show up as themselves. And I love the idea that I can just be there to hold space, but also just be a non-judgmental party where I can witness you. And there's such power in being witnessed because when you get to be exactly as you are unconditionally, which I hope to provide for people, then all of a sudden you by default learn self love and self acceptance. There's
Mm-hmm.
not this like, let me study it because it's so in theory and we could do that all day long. And I have been guilty of that, like self help, booking myself to death. But then when it came to like showing up and doing it, I was always falling short because I didn't have enough practice. And so part of the grief and the unlearning and to really be your genuine self takes practice. And I think that's part of the reason why I joy guide people towards that is because when you finally get witnessed, when you finally allow yourself to be safe in the presence of somebody who won't judge you and will support you and encourage you and be like, yes, get angry, or I am so sorry. Like that sounds horrible. Like, how can we frame this? How can I support you? Like, there's something about that. And I know for me, it's like I didn't really have that growing up. And it was so taboo to go to therapy. It was also, my parents didn't have the tools. So they were very emotionally repressed and my grandparents were, like generations of
Yeah.
emotional repression to really and narratives around like, oh, there's something wrong with you if you do get help. Like I want to unwind all of that and show you that no, it's safe and also it's like empowering. And when you disrupt that narrative, then all of a sudden you become wealthy in all areas of your life because you genuinely see that the core of who you are is worthy enough. And then when you understand your value, we know this, right? In business, it's like then all of a sudden there's no convincing about people wanting to work with you or any of those things because you're just showing up exactly as you are.
Which is yes, absolutely. There's such a big difference. And I think so we've talked a lot about breaking it down of like when we're not feeling joy and like how like what's the blocks that get there. But paint
Yeah.
us a picture. Like what would be an example or maybe a like an idea of like a day in the life of someone who has been able to break down these blocks and be able to
Yeah.
find more joy in their life.
Um, let me just use myself as an example. I think that might be the easiest. I think for me, I always thought that happiness, like truly happy people, were just consistently happy, or truly joyful people were just joyful all the time. Like this is just something like they just have this special gift. And it's like an exclusive club, and I'm not a part of it. And this really blows, and life sucks. So for me, it's like the awareness that joy is innate in all of us. We are all worthy and deserving of feeling happy and happiness and joy. And there's this understanding now in my everyday life that once I actually allow myself to feel the grief, and the grief comes in waves, right? When you're a human, like you could be grieving about a death of a loved one. You could be grieving about, becoming a new mom and like the life before that you had is no longer what you have. Or the career transition, as exciting as it is, and you're finally living your dream, that you're also like a huge part of an old dream is dying. And I think understanding true joy is knowing that it is inconsistent and that throughout the day, you can harness it at will. And part of that is knowing and trusting yourself and knowing that, oh, okay, if I'm feeling off nowadays, before I would punish myself, my inner critic would be like, what's wrong with you? Like, stop that. That just voice that I've heard from my parents or from whomever.
Totally.
And once I quiet that down and allow myself to tune into my body and understand that my nervous system is picking up on some trauma potentially or habit of being addicted to unhappiness, which is my problem personally. But it's like knowing that, oh, right, if this is just a habit, then I can also understand that throughout my day, I can reframe that habit and know that if I take steps and tune into my body, allow my body to be a channel for whatever feeling that I'm having, definitely do not attempt to create a story around it, which a lot of logical, high achieving people like to do. They're like, okay, let me bullet point why I might be feeling this thing at this time.
I've never done that ever. What are you talking
So
about?
guilty. And trusting that whatever needs to pass through my body is what is needed at this time. And then once that happens, I notice that my joy turnaround is so much quicker. And a lot of times for me, I still have, and I've heard you talk about this on your podcast, I have my own coach. I have my own guides. I have my own healers that are there to support me because I know that I am not special. This is a human trait. I have it no
This is
matter how much work
this is
I
what it
do.
is to be human in
It
general. This is
is.
what it
It
is to be
is.
human. Like, and
There
like
is,
whoever
yeah.
sold
And
us this idea of perfect humanship was full of it. Was full of
no. And I used to believe that where I'm like, "Oh, well this expert or this guru, they've got it unlocked." And it's like, "No, they don't. They
it.
probably don't. They're either lying to you or lying to themselves if they don't say that they also need support because I think that's a fundamental. And so when I get my support, when I reach out to a friend, when I am in need, which again, a lot of high achievers don't do that because we're so fixated on making sure our reputation is we've got our shit together, or we want to make sure that we're very independent and we've got it, we've got this. But it's okay to not have this. And the more as a high achiever I have learned in my business to say and admit lovingly and non-judgmentally, I do not know, those are the moments in my daily life that all of a sudden, wow, it's like this burden, this weight, this huge backpack that I'm carrying of responsibility for making change in the world, which is like what I want to do for my, calling. But it's like I can put that backpack down because I accept fully that this is a part of the beautiful, messy, joyful human experience is both living the grief and living the joy simultaneously.
I love this. I think it's fantastic. So what I hear in your response though, what I hear in there is you have a better relationship with your ego. Maybe you have more voices than your inner critic hanging out with you too. I
Mm.
hear that you have created a fantastic connection with your body. It's with finding emotions and to being able to understand that you're vulnerable, but vulnerable with the right people. You found your community,
Yes.
you found your support, but also too, you've activated a lot of self-compassion and a lot
Mhm.
of realism, like being able to like be like this definition of a life well lived is defined by you, not what society tells you it is. So like
Exactly.
there's a lot of like with everything that you said in there, it's going okay, like next time that you're feeling an emotion, maybe you give yourself some space to like I heard spaciousness too. That's what I was listening when you're
Yes.
like there's space for things, there's space for feelings, there's also space for understanding, but
Yes.
also space for talking and be like allowing people to see you. So I that so when I what I love about this conversation is like maybe when you hear that June's on the How to Find Joy podcast, you're like thinking of like people like dancing in the rain and just joy. And there's probably a sense that like we could do that whenever we understand these things. But there's a lot of like joy. Joy becomes easier from just knowing yourself and
Mhm.
allowing yourself to be known. So
Yes.
finishing off
Yeah.
the podcast, I just want to ask this because
Yeah.
this is the Limitless podcast. For you, what would you say being limitless means to you?
Oh, this is so good. I actually just truly believe that once you access and find your joy center within you, you are limitless. I think part of that internally sourced wealth is part of the reason why I want to tell everyone how to access their joy is because the things that are blocking our joy are usually the things that are limiting us. And so once we actually figure out what those blocks are and how do we lovingly navigate through them and maybe even praise them and be like, okay, see you block. And then I'm going to lovingly push you away so that I can fly and be the core of who I am. And so, yeah, I think being, what you said was true. Self-acceptance, self-love, like self-compassion. These are buzzwords that we hear all the time. And it's kind of annoying. But there is a fundamental truth about it. But to really live it and to learn it is a practice, much like meditation, much like anything that you want to be good at. And I believe that joy is a practice. And once you start practicing your joy muscle, then you can start feeling that limitlessness grow and grow and grow, because that self-acceptance, that self-love is ultimately the power that allows you to fully be unstoppable.
Oh, I love that response. And I just to throw out the idea of like that self-acceptance and self-love,
Yeah.
they're just words until you actually feel it. Like if you're ever going like, do I accept myself? If you have to
Mm-hmm.
ask yourself the question, it's likely that there's some things that you're not accepting. So
Yeah.
being able to work through it. I love that because like they're buzzwords until you're like, no, I do it. I'm there. I know right now I'm
Yeah.
giving myself a lot of self-love. I know right now I'm not accepting myself. Like you'll find that. And I think that's what I love about your response is like actually living and feeling it.
I
So
know. And
good.
also like accountability is a huge part of that too. And I think, a lot of high achieving business people and entrepreneurs, we have accountability in our business, but we don't have a lot of accountability when it comes to taking care of ourselves and prioritizing our pleasure, our play, and our joy. And that's usually often why people come to me too, is because without somebody guiding you, without somebody holding you accountable and putting up that mirror, you will end up in burnout like 100% of the time, just because you don't recognize that, oh, right, this self-acceptance, this self-love is key to the rest of the way that I can live my wealthy life.
Having mirrors in your life. Absolutely. I love it. Clearly this conversation could keep going.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm not just saying like I'm like I have so many more things I want to talk to June about, but this is what's so beautiful about her podcast. She gets to talk about these topics all the time. So of course, go find her over at How to Find Joy podcast, and then you'll love it. But also too, June, tell us a little bit about how we can continue to connect with you.
Yeah. So I'm basically on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, anything at Joy Guide June. And then also my website is www.joyguidejune.com.
Beautiful. We'll make sure to have those in the show notes. June, thank you so much for your sharing today.
Thank
You
you,
were so
Jamie.
vulnerable and gave such great advice. We'll see you soon.
Thank you so much.